practices in this area have more benefited the large farmers, but new forms of contractual and sharecropping relationships are also emerging between private dealers and the farmers. Now let us try to understand what exactly is contractual farming. Contractual farming is when the big players who retail the fruits and vegetables, they enter into an agreement with the farmers, with small farmers throughout the country, in which their entire produce is taken up by the big retailers and at a predetermined price. So the farmer does not have to worry about selling his produce. He knows that he has to grow this kind of variety. For that also a lot of input is provided to them by the big players, and the farmers are able to grow those crops in a very scientific way. And then they are also, they have a buyback arrangement with these big players who in turn lift their entire production. And in turn, they have these very systemized supply chain for their products, which then they are able to retail it to consumers all over the country. So it's a win-win situation for the big players as well as for the farmers, because the farmer does not have to worry about his produce remaining unsold. And this is a model which can actually develop in the horticulture sector to benefit the small and the marginal farmers. This is already being done in India and it is constantly increasing, and this should increase also because it provides the wherewithal for the small farmer to also make an impact on the national scenario through his produce. There are some figures that I would like to share with you regarding the marketable surplus of fruits and vegetables. In 2001-2002, the production of fruits and vegetables was 133 million tons, and during the same period, the market surplus was 166. As you know, India is the producer of second largest producer of fruits and vegetables in the world. So you can know from this table that what is the comfortable situation that India is placed in regarding fruits and vegetables. It is estimated that in 2011-12, the production would be 300 million tons and the market surplus would be 265 million tons. Let's reflect back on some of the achievements for India in the horticulture sector. We find that India is the second largest producer of fruits and vegetables in the world. The major fruits accounting for bulk of the production are mango, banana, grapes, citrus, apple, guava, papaya and pineapple. India ranks first in the production of both mango and banana. The important vegetable crops produced in India are cauliflower, pea, potato, tomato, brinjal, onion, okra and cabbage. It ranks first in cauliflower and pea production. Lately, exotic vegetables like broccoli, parsley and gherkin are also gaining importance. India's concern in agriculture. What are the limiting factors in horticulture? Let's try to reflect on that also. India's share in global fruits and vegetable trade is less than 1%. That is, India, though is the second largest producer of fruits and vegetables, yet its share in the global trade is less than 1%. We are not able to export our surplus fruits and vegetables, and that is why India's share is very dismal. Only 2% of the horticulture produced in India is processed, vis-a-vis a situation like 40% of the produce is processed in countries like Brazil and Malaysia. A high percentage of the fruits and vegetables perish due to inadequate processing facilities. As you know, the fruits and vegetables are highly perishable commodities. So here we do not have adequate number of cold storage chains which would help to transport the fruits and vegetables to far off distances, nor do we have a good processing capacity. So most of the fruits and vegetables, either they are consumed immediately, and those which are not, they are spoiled. So here we have a situation where on one hand we are growing a lot of fruits and vegetables, we are actually surplus in this area, and yet at the same time a good percentage of that production is lost due to the perishability of the products and because we do not have adequate processing capabilities. India's share in global processed food market is only 1.5%. So in these areas, definitely India needs to improve. It is not enough to produce a product, but also needs to market the product as well as process the product so that the maximum output can be retained, and at the same time it brings economic returns to the farmers as well as the economy also grows in the process. What are the constraints in horticulture? We find that is low productivity. The average productivity of horticulture produce is about 7 tons per hectare compared to about 30 tons per hectare in many Western nations. Second is, we have a high cost of production. Thirdly, as I just discussed a little while ago, we have huge post-harvest losses. And fourth is that we have an inefficient supply chain and poor market intelligence. So what it results in is that the produce of that area is consumed within that region itself. There is very little possibility of the product being taken from area of surplus to area of scarcity. Because we do not have the cold storages, we do not have a very efficient supply chain mechanism which would help to distribute the products in an even way and help to get the maximum economic advantage from a market surplus product. Promotion of indigenous plant vegetables. Now, as you know, diversification also involves that you can grow those plants which were traditionally eaten by our population earlier, but as more and more varieties came up, the old traditional vegetables were forgotten and gradually they were only eaten by people of that region and others did not develop a taste for it. So diversification can involve that these indigenous plant varieties can be given more importance because gradually they are getting extinct. So these indigenous crops traditionally planted and consumed by the local subsistence farmers are being promoted for wider consumption. And let me tell you that they are very nutritional vegetables. Yet because we are not used to them, so we normally, and we are not having the awareness also. So that is why they do not command a big demand. For that, that is where, the policy makers can make a difference by not only encouraging the growth of such indigenous plants, but also popularizing them. Some of these vegetables are actually not even cultivated. They just grow wild in the areas. And they are just picked up by the people who are basic subsistence farmers, and they sell it either for their own to their own community in the same village, or they consume it themselves. And these traditional leafy vegetables are very nutritious. They are highly recommended due to their relatively high nutritional value, and they are important in terms of food security during times of drought and poor harvest. They can also generate an income for the farmer. Their consumption gives diversity in daily food intake, adding flavor and taste to the diet. These vegetables are rich in vitamins, minerals, trace elements, dietary fiber and proteins. Withstanding their value as food, the vegetables also serve as a source of medicines Hence, they are important in their ecological, agronomic, and cultural values. So these vegetables which are indigenous to our country, they should be encouraged at all levels, and that can be an important reason why farm diversification can definitely add value to the farmers' economic returns. Now we come to another important aspect of modern farming and of diversification in farms, and that is of mushroom cultivation. As you must be aware, mushroom is a nutritive and high value crop that brings good returns to the farmers cultivating it. The horticulture department is guiding farmers to grow the mushroom crop in a scientific way. They believe that it is going to be one of the prominent crops of the future. Even now, today, there is high consumption of mushroom because it has got high protein value in many of the families which are aware of this fact. In the markets, therefore, there is a high demand for mushrooms due to its culinary, nutritional, and health benefits. And mushrooms can be sold both in the dry as well as in the raw form. So what exactly does mushroom cultivation entail is that the farmers can not only sell the produce immediately after it is harvested, but they can also dry them and then sell it in the market at a higher price, because then it becomes a value added product and it can be sold during the time when mushrooms are not in season. Now let's try to find out what is the potential for mushroom cultivation. In India, 55% of the households consume mushroom in their daily diet. The northeast region stands first with 60% of the total consumption. High-priced mushrooms are giving good dividend to the cultivators and thus motivating others also, especially the women farmers, to begin mushroom cultivation. It is easier for women to cultivate mushrooms than other crops because this does not require too much of a physical labor. So women are able to not only grow these crops, but also are able to just a moment, I want to know, women farmers, it is very beneficial to grow mushrooms because it does not require too much of physical labor. It is easy to grow once they know the method of growing mushrooms, and they are able to generate good returns from the sale of their mushroom crop. There are different types of mushrooms which are suitable for cultivation at different times of the year. At present, 3 mushroom varieties are being cultivated in India. They are the white button mushroom, the paddy straw mushroom, and the oyster mushroom. White button mushroom is the most popular and economically sound to grow. This is the mushroom which you normally see in the market. It is due to its low temperature requirement. Its cultivation is restricted to the cool climatic areas and to North India only during the winter. It requires a cold climate, so it cannot be grown throughout the year. In summer, the tropical paddy straw mushroom is suitable for growing in most parts of India. It has low yield and short shelf life, so it can be basically grown only as a garden crop. It cannot be adopted on a very wide scale as to be widely sold in the market. It is more like a garden crop because it has got a short shelf life. But the reason why it can be grown is because it grows during the time when white button mushroom cannot be grown. Then oyster mushrooms, they can grow at moderate temperature ranging from 22 to 28 degrees centigrade, and it is suitable for growth in most places in India. Now for the farmers, once they are aware of the methods of cultivating mushrooms, they can also be sensitized towards the pattern which can be adopted or the production schedule that can be adopted for growing different kinds of mushroom throughout the year. And that can be that the mushroom cultivators can follow the production schedule that allows them to grow mushrooms around the year. And a suggested year-wise production schedule can be that mid-November to mid-March they can grow button mushrooms. February to mid-April they can grow oyster mushrooms. Mid-June to mid-September they can grow paddy straw mushrooms. And September to November they can grow oyster mushrooms. Regarding the exotic vegetables, let us discuss first what are the exotic vegetables and what is their importance. The exotic vegetables are broccoli, avocado, asparagus, artichoke, baby corn, bell pepper, that is the colored capsicum, zucchini and gherkin. Exotic vegetables are growing in popularity as the Indian palate is getting more and more demanding and in their choice of cuisine. So people are becoming demanding because they are used to now the taste of these exotic vegetables. And you would have noticed that increasingly they are being available in our markets. Earlier these vegetables were seen only in 5-star hotels and they were mostly imported. But now they are more easily available in our local markets also. That is because for one thing the production has increased and second there is a growing demand even among the other level of, that is the middle class level also, for the demand for these exotic vegetables. Now the impact for the farmers is that those in the vicinity of the cities can cash in on this new trend if they learn how to grow and market these exotic vegetables and fruits. What is the economics of growing the exotic varieties? The produce can command a premium price as they are not commonly grown and available to all. So something in short supply definitely commands a premium pricing. There is a huge demand for them, but supply is always a constraint. Then another reason why they can be grown is the poly houses in which exotic vegetables are grown can also be used to grow out of season vegetables which ensure good financial returns to the farmer. As you would be aware that when a vegetable is not in season, it commands a more premium pricing than when it is abundant in supply and available to everyone. So these poly houses can be used to grow not only the exotic vegetables but also the out of season vegetables. The crops grown under the poly houses are safe from unfavorable environment, hailstorm, that is, it is not subjected to the normal weather conditions. Here the weather conditions can be controlled, the temperature can be controlled, the humidity can be controlled, so it has less chances of being attacked by pests and to be destroyed by weather conditions. So it is not affected by heavy rains or by lot of sunshine. So these crops can be saved from the birds and vegetables also. So entirely whatever is produced can be marketed. The humidity of the poly houses is not adversely affected by evaporation, resulting in less requirement of water. So that means that even where water is scarce, these vegetables can be grown. And lastly, in the limited area of poly houses, insects and pest control is also not required, and that saves considerable expense to the farmer. And he can do with very minimal kind of pesticides and these fertilizers, because the requirement is also less. It is grown under controlled conditions. We earlier talked about contract farming. Let's discuss a little bit more in detail, and that too especially in context of the exotic vegetables and fruits. Big companies dealing in the retail and supply of exotic vegetables and fruits engage farmers on a contract basis and give them a buyback guarantee for their produce. The farmers supply at fixed schedules and rates throughout the year. So, as I said earlier, it's a win-win situation for both the farmer as well as for the big retail companies, because on one hand they get quality produce without actually producing the vegetables themselves, and on the other hand the farmer is also able to get a good price for his produce. He does not have to work towards the marketing of the product also. Then these farmers are also provided technical know-how, they are provided help in procuring good quality seeds and equipped with other material needed to grow these vegetables and fruits. So it's a guidance that the farmer gets through these big companies, because they have the financial muscle to provide them with this technical know-how. They can provide them with good seeds, and in return both gain in the bargain. The demand for exotic varieties. The vegetables most in demand are asparagus, baby corn, colored capsicum, broccoli, snow pea, iceberg lettuce, sweet corn and zucchini. All these vegetables are now grown in India. The main source of demand are food supermarkets in cities and big hotels, which cater to people used to international cuisines. Prior to their production in India, the exotic vegetables were imported. Now a lot of exotic fruits are also being produced in India, and these fruits are rambutan, mangosteen, durian, dragon and mackerel, and these are now grown in India and are supplied to hotels and supermarkets where the demand is the greatest. Now we come to another aspect of diversification, and that is the farmers can diversify into growing flowers, that is floriculture. Let's try to find out how did it all begin in India. In the early 90s, floriculture and aquaculture were the two new opportunities in India, and several first generation entrepreneurs jumped into floriculture, as most of them came from rural areas and had some land and some experience in agriculture. So they thought that this would be an easy game, they can get into floriculture, and they tried it. But because they did not know all the fine nuances of growing flowers, they did not have the entire knowledge with them. So many of them, they made losses, and they were unable to service the loans which they had taken from the banks. So for them, it was a downhill journey, and many of them gave up. The reasons were manifold, and they were mainly to do with the weather conditions and the freight, labor and land costs. These are the four main aspects of floriculture. The reason is that land is important, the weather is very important, then the flowers, as you know, are very highly perishable products. So they also need good freight facilities to be present at the place where they are grown, and that was not available throughout the country. So these were some of the reasons why the floriculture business in the initial years did not take off in a very big way. But gradually things are improving. India is making a mark on the international scene also. Let's try to find out why India is, for India, floriculture can be definitely a good option. Floriculture is suitable for India due to favorable weather conditions and inexpensive labor. However, Ethiopia is one country which is proving to be a better business destination for Indian floriculturists. So a lot of floriculturists are now going to Ethiopia to set up their business. For one thing, there they get, they are able to set up business in very little time. They get abundant labor, trade arrangements are good. So they are able to make better returns while operating from Ethiopia than from India. So somewhere the Our policymakers, our strategist thinkers have to think about how they can make the same kind of changes in India, because India has a lot of natural advantages, and be able to make a change in the floriculture business for our farmers. The India's cut flower industry is booming mainly in South India, because the greater the height of the place where it is grown, better are the quality of the flowers that are produced. For instance, Ooty is at 1900 square feet above sea level, and that is ideal for floriculture. Small scale farmers also can participate in flower cultivation, as there is a robust domestic demand for traditional varieties of flowers. The floriculture also fills gaps in the agricultural cycle for poor casual laborers. So that is that it is not only agriculture that can employ them, but also floriculture. So during the time when the cereal crops are not grown, or when there is more of seasonal unemployment, at that time they can be engaged for the floriculture business. Then floriculture is a quality and scale business like most others. India is in race with the Dutch and the Kenyans to dominate the world market, and it was the Dutch who had the head start, so they are obviously still leading, but India is trying to catch up. Traditional floriculture. What exactly was traditional floriculture? That was when Indian farmers grow flowers on parts of their land holdings, along with coarse grains, millets, cereals and vegetables. In this case, the flowers are grown on a small scale using traditional methods of cultivation. By growing the flowers, farmers ensure some cash income on a daily basis. So along with their other crops, they are also growing some flowers, and they use traditional methods of growing these flowers. Then growing of traditional flowers in the open field is a routine kind of activity wherein the entire family provides support in terms of labor in the field, mostly the women family members. So it is grown in the open along with the other crops, and the women of the family are the ones who are tending to them, and they are growing these crops, which are then sold on a daily basis in the open market. The market prices fluctuate widely depending upon the demand and the supply. Of course, during the festivals and the marriage season, the demand peaks up. And most of the varieties that are grown in the open fields would be varieties like marigold, which would fetch a good price in the market, maybe roses, or they are limited. They are more traditional kind of flowers and not the exotic flowers, because that would require the poly houses to grow them. Now, what is modern floriculture? It constitutes the production of cut flowers of different varieties, colors, shapes, and these flowers have got an enhanced vase life and are grown under protected conditions. So when you buy a stem of gerbera, a stem of gladii, they can be put into the vase and they stay like that for quite a few days. So these flowers have got a long vase life, and that is why they are more easily purchased by the population. Secondly, the demand for exotic variety of cut flowers is on the rise. The exotic varieties that are much in demand are roses, dahlias, chrysanthemums, gladii, tuberoses, gerberas and bougainvilleas. Value-added advantage in floriculture is very high because flowers, especially for the export market, are a high-value commodity. It makes floriculture the fastest and the most lucrative form of agriculture in India. The export surplus finds its way into the local market, influencing people in the cities, and they also purchase and use these flowers. So on one hand, the international demand is high. On the other hand, the domestic demand is also high because people with more disposable incomes and high per capita income have the money to purchase exotic kind of flowers and decorate their homes. I'll give you a small case study of Himachal Pradesh, how floriculture is thriving in Himachal Pradesh. More and more farmers have been diversifying to floriculture from traditional crops in Himachal Pradesh. Floriculture today is generating an economy of about 28 crores annually, with more than 2,800 farmers directly engaged in this vocation. It was a mere 30 hectares in 1993 where floriculture was practiced, but now the area under floriculture has increased to 617.65 hectares in 2008-2009. So you can see the quantum jump in the area grown, the area which grows flowers, from a mere 30 hectares to 617 hectares in 2008-2009. So it is a lucrative business for the farmers to grow flowers, and that is why more and more farmers are taking to it. Flowers grown in the state are in great demand in Delhi, the main market, and other parts of the country. However, they are not exported. The reason is because it does not have international flight connectivity. It's a commercial viable proposition, fetching good remunerative returns to the farmers. Now let's try to also find out what has been the government's support to floriculture. As I told you earlier that the government has set up the Horticulture Technology Mission, under which subsidies are provided for setting up the poly houses and development of water resources, which has helped in the growth of floriculture. The Department of Horticulture has established floriculture nurseries in the different states. They play a key role in introduction and multiplication of planting material, bulbs and seeds of improved flower varieties. So these nurseries which have been established, they help to provide the seeds and also the technical know-how, as well as provides all the support to the farmers who are interested in growing flowers. The department organizes short duration training programs for the growers. They also conduct study tours for flower growers from time to time to create awareness among them and expose them to new trends and technologies in floriculture. Under the technical assistance program, free technical advice is also made available by the Department of Horticulture to the floriculturists. So the government is making many different programs for making the technical know-how, as well as to increase the growth of floriculture in India. It has met with success also, as more and more farmers are taking to it. But then again, there is a lot of room for improvement, and as years go by, India might one day figure on the international map as one of the leading producers and exporters of the cut varieties, of the exotic varieties of flowers. What are the constraints in floriculture? The flower trade in India is limited mainly to two cities, that is Bangalore and Pune, as only these two cities offer the right weather conditions and the logistic infrastructure support required for this industry. Ooty, Kodaikanal and even the foothill of Himalayas have the right weather conditions, but since the flowers are highly perishable, so air connectivity is a must, which is not available in these cities. So if we want to grow on the international scene in floriculture, then the places with good weather conditions for growing flowers should also have the air connectivity to different parts of the world. The trained manpower that this trade requires is not available everywhere. A farmer cannot grow flowers if he does not have the knowledge about it. And if that is not provided to him, then he would not be able to do so. And the labor which is engaged, they should also be provided with the knowledge required to grow flowers, and that is not always possible. So that also is a limiting factor for floriculture. Then another reason why floriculture has not grown to the extent that was possible is because land prices are rather high. So when a farmer wants to expand, he is not able to do so because he is not able to purchase additional land for growing his flowers. Then another reason is that the freight costs are very high, especially during the December-March season, and that is the peak season for flowers, as it is the holiday season in Europe, and during that time some of their festivals like Christmas, New Year Eve and Valentine, they also fall. And that is adding to the growing discomfort of Indian floricultures, because at that time the demand is high, at the same time the freight cost is also very high. Then another constraint is that incorporation of operations takes somewhere between 1 to 3 months in a place like India. Let us say the floriculturist has bought the land, then he starts the process in motion by applying to the departments where he has to get the technical know-how, and the entire process is long, and by the time he actually can start operations, a lot of time has elapsed. Many of the farmers are not in a position to wait for that long, so they continue growing the traditional crops which they have grown since a long time, and they do not diversify into floriculture, which can be a very viable economic proposition for them. Also, the government has to look into this fact that there are no priority sector loans for floriculture. In every sector where the government wants to encourage the production of a particular commodity or of a particular crop, the government is providing that support. But for floriculture, no such support has been provided. There are no priority sector loans. That is, if anybody from the floriculture sector wants to approach the banks for additional loans, then the loans are not provided to him on a priority basis. It is like just any other loan. So if this aspect is taken into account, then that would ease the problems that the floriculturists face. So maybe this is something which can be taken into account by our horticulture mission. Regarding flower exports, most Indian players are focused on the export market, and there was virtually zero export in 1990. And by 2000-2001, floriculturists had earned about 250 crores by exporting flowers, mainly roses, to Europe and Japan. There exists a huge domestic market for flowers in India also, but the prices are unremunerated. The reason is unremunerated. I'll give you an example. A single stem of rose in India sells for about 25 to 50 paise, while the same internationally would sell anywhere between 11 to 22 rupees. So it is viable for the market to sell more in the international market than to the domestic market. Moreover, the Indian exports to European Union attracts a tax varying between 6 to 9%. So that is a high tax that is levied on floricultural exports. So for that, there can be some dialogue that can be initiated by our government with the EU Union and try to, make it more rational so that the floriculture business that is the export market, can flourish in a big way from India to Europe and to America and other international destinations. So today we have discussed a number of different options that farmer has when he diversifies his cropping pattern from subsistence to high value added items like exotic fruits, exotic vegetables. And there is a lot of support that has been provided by our government. The farmer has to make use of that. Loans can be provided to them, and they are being given by banks. So the farmer has many options today than he had some time back. And for that, the farmer has to take up the challenge of growing different kinds of crops and provide for his own economic stability as well as contribute to the national growth. Thank you very much.